Have you ever wondered how a quiet, really humble craftsman from the early 20th century still manages to completely confound today's technology-equipped modern power hitters? I mean, it's a totally fascinating paradox, and it honestly sits at the very heart of the sport's history. So, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the life, the vision, and the unmatched work of the legendary Donald Ross, a man whose masterpieces absolutely continue to define what timeless golf architecture is all about.
I want you to listen to this guiding principle for a second. A truly great golf course reveals its brilliance slowly. Every round teaches something new. That single thought perfectly sets the elegant, patient tone of Ross's whole architectural philosophy. He fundamentally believed in courses that unfold and educate you, rather than just overwhelming you right off the tee. If you're the kind of focused learner who really appreciates genuine mastery and design that stands the test of time, you are going to love this journey.
Okay, here's our scorecard for today's explainer. We're going to start with the American golf craftsman, then take a tour through his masterpieces of the landscape, unpack the genius of rooting, study his famous greens that educate, and wrap it all up with his timeless legacy.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the American Golf Craftsman, covering 1872 to 1948. To really get the courses, we have to look at the man himself, and the era where he became the premier architect that clubs were literally begging to hire.
Just think about this staggering number for a second. 400. That represents the massive, almost unbelievable scale of golf courses Donald Ross designed or remodeled across North America. He was building American masterpieces on an industrial scale, yet he somehow managed to do it with this incredibly exact artisan's touch. So what actually makes a Ross course a Ross course? His designs are defined by a few key hallmarks: natural routing, those infamous crowned greens, strategic bunkering, walkable layouts, and a timeless playability that is always subtle rather than severe. These features were his signature quiet confidence. You see, he never chased passing trends. Instead, he just trusted the land. His greatest courses feel almost effortless because absolutely nothing is forced. The fairways just naturally follow the terrain, and the greens seem to settle right into the landscape. Moving right along to Section 2, Masterpieces of the Landscape. Let's take a really quick rapid-fire tour through a gallery of his most famous creations to see how these hallmarks actually come to life.
First up, we've got Pinehurst No. 2. Down in the rolling sandhills of North Carolina, this place is truly the beating heart of his legacy. Ross used this course as his own lifelong laboratory. He didn't just build it and walk away, he was constantly tweaking it, studying it, letting it evolve. And its greatest defense? Those famous crowned putting surfaces that just flat out reject careless approach shots. It's a masterclass that still teaches US Open champions that precision is always going to matter more than raw distance. Miss your spot by a few yards and your recovery becomes a nightmare. Now, hop up to Detroit, nestled among these massive mature trees, and we have Oakland Hills South Course. Originally, it was very elegant and strategic, but it grew a lot more demanding over the decades. In fact, it earned a pretty formidable nickname from the legendary Ben Hogan during the '51 US Open. After winning, Hogan famously declared, "I brought this course, this monster, to its knees." And, well, the nickname stuck. Ross never really intended for it to be brutal, but it proves just how demanding a thoughtfully strategic golf course becomes under the intense pressure of a major championship.
Next, let's head down to Florida's Atlantic coast to Seminole Golf Club. At first glance, you might think it's kind of understated. There are no dramatic mountains, no towering cliffs, no waterfalls. But Ross relied on a totally invisible element here: the wind. The wind is literally the primary architecture. It completely changes the character of every single hole depending on the day. Seminole is perfect proof that you don't need spectacular scenery to have outstanding architecture. You just need to reward precise positioning.
And then we have the Inverness Club, which perfectly showcases his genius for rhythm. We call it the Inverness Flow. Every hole just naturally pulls you to the next, subtly building on the challenge you just faced. The bunkering forces you to really think about placement, and the hole routing invites you to walk it without getting exhausted. That rhythm is exactly why it never feels repetitive, and it's why it's hosted so many US Opens and PGA championships. You really see his brilliant adaptability when you compare different terrains. Take Aranimink and Eastlake, for example. The gentle simplicity of Aranimink, with its wide corridors and those really subtle elevation changes, creates interest without screaming for your attention. It's that idea that elegance whispers rather than shouts. Meanwhile, down at Eastlake, which you probably know as the home of the Tour Championship, Ross took the existing landscape and enhanced it with natural movement and strategic angles. It preserves Atlanta's golfing heritage and proves his core philosophy. Great courses are meant to serve generations.
All right, let's dive into Section 3, the genius of routing. While most of us out there are obsessing over his putting surfaces, the true architecture purists, they revere his routing above all else.
Ross had this extraordinary gift for what we call the walkable journey. Coming from Scotland, he fundamentally believed golf was meant to be enjoyed on foot. So he made sure the walks between a green and the next tee were short. He was constantly shifting directions so you'd face different winds. He made sure no hole felt like it was just sitting out there isolated. The whole course unfolds naturally, step by step, exactly like a carefully written story.
Which brings us to Section 4, greens that educate. If you ask an experienced golfer what they remember most after playing a Ross course, they almost always get this knowing smile on their face and say, the greens. See, Ross didn't need tricked-up hazards or excessive difficulty. The reality of a Ross green is that it has this super gentle initial appearance. It totally lulls you into a false sense of security. But then, reality hits. It swiftly punishes an approach shot that's even slightly off. It demands the most delicate chips imaginable, and it leaves you staring down incredibly slippery downhill putts. That quiet complexity, where every single tiny contour dictates your shot, that trust and subtlety over severity, is exactly why his greens are legendary. And finally, Section 5, a timeless legacy. Let's look at what is undoubtedly his greatest accomplishment, remaining totally relevant in an ever-changing sport. There is such a fascinating tension between modern golf and Ross's architecture today. I mean, balls fly farther, players are swinging faster than ever, and technology is just off the charts. But Ross's defense holds up. It relies on thoughtful challenge, strategic architecture, and demanding precision over pure power. Even though modern equipment has transformed how the game is played, a Ross design never becomes obsolete. They're still hosting major championships because making a thoughtful decision that never goes out of style. He really was the invisible architect. He genuinely believed the designer should just fade into the background, and that the golfer should remember the experience of the land, not the guy who built it. Ross wasn't out there chasing fame. He was chasing excellence. He was a craftsman. And ironically, that humility, making his courses feel like nature just intended them to be there all along, is exactly why we remember him so fondly and why his courses are still ranked among the best in the world. So as we wrap up this explainer on why his subtle architecture creates the deepest, most enduring challenges in the sport, I want to leave you with one final, provocative question. Will modern power ever truly conquer thoughtful design? Power fades, tech changes, but thoughtful golf remains timeless. Keep that in mind before we hit the next tee in part 3 of our series, where we'll look at his enduring legacy, the modern restoration of his masterpieces, and his profound influence on today's greatest designers like Tom Fazio and Gil Hans. Thanks so much for learning with me today.